The afternoon sun filtered through the expensive velvet curtains of the master bedroom, but it didn't feel warm. It felt clinical, exposing every microscopic speck of dust that Julianne had spent a lifetime trying to hide. To the outside world, Julianne's life was a masterpiece of suburban perfection, and her 17-year-old son, Leo, was the crown jewel. He was the angel of Crestview, a straight-A student, a varsity cellist, and a boy with a smile so pure it seemed to radiate its own light. Julianne lived for that light. She had spent 18 years shielding him, curating his environment, and convinced herself that she had raised a boy who didn't have a single dark corner in his soul. But as Julianne stood in the hallway, a cold, sickening dread began to coil in her stomach. It wasn't because of anything she saw, but because of the silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that seemed to pulse from behind Leo's locked bedroom door. Mrs. Sterling? The voice of Elena, the new housekeeper, was sharp and jagged, breaking the stillness like a stone through a window. Julianne turned to see Elena standing in the doorway of Leo's room. The boy was at a weekend leadership retreat, a 3-day trip that Julianne had paid for to reward his hard work. Elena's face was a ghostly, bloodless white. Her hands, usually steady and efficient, were trembling so violently that the spray bottle she held clattered against the doorframe. "I was just deep cleaning the baseboards, like you asked," Elena whispered, her voice sounding like it belonged to someone who had just looked into an abyss. I moved the heavy mahogany desk. The rug, it was shifted. And then I felt it. One of the floorboards wasn't nailed down. Julianne felt a wave of nausea roll over her. "It's a historic house, Elena. The wood expands. It's just an old floor." "No, ma'am," Elena said, stepping back, her eyes wide with a pity that felt like a hot iron against Julianne's skin. "It's not the floor. It's what's breathing underneath it." Julianne pushed past her heels clicking a frantic, desperate rhythm on the hardwood. She entered Leo's room, a room that smelled of expensive laundry detergent and high-end cologne. It was a room designed for an angel, but as she knelt by the corner of the room where the desk had been moved, she saw it. A single wide plank of oak had been meticulously sanded down, so it could be lifted without a sound. With a hand that felt like lead, Julianne hooked her fingers under the edge and pulled. The wood creaked, a sound of finality that echoed in the sterile room. As the board came away, the scent hit her first. It wasn't the smell of rot, but something worse, the cloying, artificial sweetness of dozens of different perfumes mixed with the metallic tang of old copper. Beneath the floorboards, nestled in the dark insulation, was a row of neat, velvet-lined boxes. Julianne's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic wail against a cage. She opened the first box. Inside was not a trophy or a hidden cigarette. It was a collection of silver charms, a lock of hair tied with a blue ribbon, and a single, cracked pearl earring that belonged to the girl who had gone missing from the neighboring town 3 months ago. Julianne's breath hitched, turning into a shallow, panicked gasp. She reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling against the screen. She needed to call Leo. She needed him to tell her this was a mistake, a prank, a misunderstanding. She opened his latest social media post from the retreat. It was a photo of him standing by a lake, looking into the sunset. His face was calm, his expression one of pure, angelic peace. The caption read, "Finding clarity in the quiet. Some things are better left buried. Hashtag inner peace, hashtag grateful." The betrayal wasn't a sudden blow. It was a slow, agonizing realization. For years she had built a pedestal for him, and he had used that height to hide a monster. As Julianne stared at the missing girl's earring, she realized she didn't know the boy in the photo at all. She was looking at a stranger wearing her son's skin. Julianne didn't move. She couldn't. The silver charms in the lock of hair seemed to vibrate under the harsh glare of the ceiling light, mocking her years of perfect parenting. Behind her, she could hear Elena's shallow, terrified breathing. "Mrs. Sterling, we have to call the police," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "That earring, I saw it on the news. That girl, Sophie, she's only 16. Her parents are on TV every night crying for her." Julianne's hand hovered over the velvet box, her skin crawling. If she called the police, the pedestal she had built for Leo wouldn't just crumble, it would explode, taking her entire world with it. The charity galas, the university legacy, the perfect mother reputation, it would all be incinerated by the contents of a hole in the floor. "Wait," Julianne snapped, her voice coming out colder and sharper than she intended. She stood up, her legs feeling like they were made of glass. "We don't know where these came from. Leo is a collector. He buys vintage things at flea markets. You know how he is, Elena. He's sensitive. He likes history." "This isn't history, ma'am," Elena said, stepping back toward the door, her eyes darting to the hallway. "This is a crime scene." Suddenly, the silent house was pierced by a high-pitched, melodic chime. It was the smart doorbell notification on Julianne's phone. Her heart skipped a beat. She swiped the screen with a trembling thumb. The camera feed showed the front porch. It was Leo. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 24 hours. He was standing there in his crisp white polo shirt, his cello case slung over his shoulder, looking exactly like the angel she believed he was. He looked directly into the camera lens and smiled, a slow, knowing smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't ring the bell. He just stood there, as if he knew she was watching, as if he knew she was standing in his room, staring into his darkness. "He's here," Julianne breathed, the blood draining from her face. She heard the heavy thud of the front door unlocking. Thump, the sound of his expensive sneakers, the ones she had bought him for his birthday, hitting the hardwood floor in the foyer. Step, step, step. Each footfall sounded like a gavel striking a desk. "Mom?" Leo's voice drifted up the stairs. It was rich, calm, and terrifyingly steady. The retreat ended early. I missed the quiet of my own room. "Are you upstairs?" Julianne looked at the open floorboard, then at Elena. The panic in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. She scrambled to push the oak plank back into place, her fingernails breaking against the wood as she forced it down. She grabbed the corner of the heavy mahogany desk and pulled with a strength she didn't know she possessed, sliding it back over the hidden grave of secrets, just as Leo's footsteps reached the top of the landing. Elena backed into the corner of the room, clutching her cleaning cloth like a shield. The door swung open. Leo stood in the frame, bathed in the golden afternoon light. He looked impeccable. Not a single hair was out of place. He glanced at Julianne, then at the slightly crooked rug, and finally at Elena, whose eyes were still red from weeping. "Is everything okay in here?" Leo asked. He tilted his head, a gesture of innocent confusion that Julianne had always found endearing. Now, it made her skin itch. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Mom." He walked further into the room, dropping his cello case with a heavy clatter right next to the desk. He didn't look at the floor. He looked at Julianne's phone, which was still gripped in her hand, the screen glowing with the image of the silver charms she had just photographed. "I was just helping Elena with the deep, clean—" "Honey," Julianne managed to say, her voice sounding like a ghost of itself. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Leo stepped closer, encroaching on her personal space until she could smell his fresh, clean scent. He reached out a hand and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were ice cold. "I decided I didn't like the leadership retreat," Leo whispered, his eyes locking onto hers with a freezing, surgical intensity. There were too many people watching me. I prefer it when it's just us, Mom. People who understand me. People who know how to keep things tidy. He turned his gaze toward Elena, his smile widening just a fraction. Elena, you missed a spot under the desk. Don't worry, though. I'll take care of the heavy lifting from here. The air in the room felt thick, like breathing through wet wool. Julianne stood paralyzed as Leo moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, setting his cello case down exactly over the loose floorboard. He wasn't just returning to his room, he was reclaiming his territory. Elena, you can go home for the day, Julianne whispered, her eyes darting toward the door. She needed the woman out of the house before Leo's angelic patience ran out. Elena didn't wait for a second invitation. She grabbed her supply bucket, her eyes fixed on the floor, and bolted from the room. The sound of her footsteps fading down the stairs was the last thread of safety Julianne had. Now it was just her and the boy she had raised, the boy who was currently whistling a soft, haunting cello concerto as he unbuttoned his cuffs. "She's a very curious woman, isn't she, Mom?" Leo asked, his back to her. He walked to the window and adjusted the curtain, his movements precise and clinical. People like that, they often find things they aren't meant to see. And then they don't know what to do with the burden of knowing. Julianne felt the cold bile rise in her throat. "Leo, what is under that floor?" The whistling stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was crushing the furniture. Leo turned around slowly. The sunlight was behind him now, casting his face into a dark, unreadable shadow. "I think you already know, Mom," he said, his voice dropping to a low, melodic hum. "You've always been so good at protecting my image. You spent $10,000 to hide that incident with the neighbor's dog in middle school. You lied to the principal when my chemistry project blew up the lab. You've been practicing for this moment your whole life." He stepped toward her, and for the first time, Julianne noticed the faint, dark smudge on his white polo, a tiny drop of something that looked like dried rust. "Sophie's parents are on the news every night, Leo," Julianne gasped, her voice trembling. "They are broken. If you have her things, if you know where she is, if we have her things—" "Mom," Leo corrected her gently, his hand reaching out to grip her shoulder. His grip was firm, like a vice. "If the police come, they won't just see my collection. They'll see the mother who provided the room, the mother who paid for the car I used, the mother who groomed the perfect, untouchable boy. We are a team. We always have been." He leaned in, his breath cold against her ear. "The cleaner is the only problem now. She saw your face, Mom. She saw that you know. If she goes to the police, she isn't just turning me in. She's turning us in. Are you ready to trade your velvet curtains for a concrete cell?" Julianne looked at the mahogany desk. She thought about the silver charms, the pearl earring, and the cold, calculating mind of the monster she had fed and clothed. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was hers. She had traded her morality for a curated reality, and now the bill was due. "What do we do?" she whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in her mouth. Leo smiled, and this time the light in his eyes was blindingly bright. "We do what we always do, Mom. We tidy up. I'll go talk to Elena. You stay here and make sure the floor is perfectly seamless." He turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps light and rhythmic. Julianne stood in the center of the perfect room, listening to the engine of his car roar to life in the driveway. She looked at her hands, the hands of a perfect mother, and saw they were covered in the invisible soot of her son's soul. The house had never felt so quiet. As the sound of Leo's car faded into the distance, Julianne sank to the floor, her expensive silk skirt spreading out over the oak planks like a bloodstain. She stared at the mahogany desk, the heavy, silent guardian of her son's depravity. For 20 minutes, she didn't move. She waited for the sound of sirens, for the scream of a woman, for anything that would break the suffocating grip of the perfect life she had fought so hard to maintain. But there was only the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Driven by a sudden, frantic energy, Julianne scrambled to her feet. She grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and returned to Leo's room. She pushed the desk aside with a grunt of exertion and pried the floorboard open one last time. She didn't look at the velvet boxes. She didn't look at the hair or the silver. She shoved them all into a heavy-duty trash bag, her movements jerky and desperate. She was going to burn it. She was going to erase the evidence, not for him, but for the Julianne who still wanted to believe in angels. She ran to the backyard, to the stone fire pit where they had hosted neighborhood barbecues and toasted marshmallows. She doused the bag in lighter fluid and struck a match. The flames leaped up, bright and hungry, devouring the silk ribbons and the stolen memories. As the black smoke drifted up toward the indifferent stars, Julianne felt a cold, hollow sense of relief. The evidence was gone. The angel was safe. A headlights flickered in the driveway. Julianne wiped her soot-stained face and walked toward the front of the house, composing her expression into the mask of the perfect mother. The car door slammed. She expected to see Leo's triumphant smile. Instead, she saw 3 police cruisers, their blue and red lights painting the white picket fence in the colors of a nightmare. And there, leaning against the lead car, was Elena. Her face was no longer pale, it was set in a mask of grim, righteous fury. Next to her stood a tall detective, holding a small glowing device, a digital recorder. "Mrs. Sterling," the detective said, his voice as cold as the surgical steel of a scalpel. "We don't need the floorboards, we have the audio." Julianne's hand went to her throat. She looked at Elena, who held up her cleaning apron. Tucked into the small pocket where she kept her dusting cloth was a smartphone, its screen still active. "I didn't just see the floor, ma'am," Elena said, her voice trembling but strong. "I heard the basement, and I heard everything your son said to you in that room. I hit record the moment you pushed past me." Julianne felt the world tilt. Where is Leo?" "He didn't go to Elena's house, Julianne," the detective said, stepping forward with handcuffs glinting in the moonlight. "He went to the lake. He thought he was tidying up the last bit of evidence. We picked him up 5 minutes ago as he was trying to dispose of Sophie's phone." The detective paused, looking at the smoke rising from the backyard fire pit. "And it looks like we'll be adding tampering with evidence and accessory to kidnapping to your charges, too." As they led her toward the cruiser, Julianne looked up at the second-floor window, Leo's room. The light was still on, glowing like a beacon in the dark. She realized then that the most powerful revenge isn't a hidden secret. It's the truth that refuses to stay buried. She had spent 18 years trying to keep her son's image spotless, only to realize that you can't clean a soul that is made of shadows. The angel of Crestview was gone, and in his place was a legacy of ash. As the car door hissed shut, Julianne's last thought wasn't about the prison cell waiting for her. It was about the silence. Finally, for the first time in her life, the silence was honest. 6 months later, the Sterling estate stood as a hollow monument to a lie that had finally shattered. The ivy on the brick walls had turned brittle and brown, and the for sale sign in the front yard had been defaced with spray paint, the word angel crossed out with a jagged, bloody red X. Julianne sat in a sterile, gray visitation room, her designer clothes replaced by a coarse, orange jumpsuit that chafed against her skin. She looked at her hands. They were no longer manicured. They were rough and stained from the manual labor of the prison laundry. Across from her, separated by a thick pane of reinforced glass, sat Elena. Elena didn't look like a housekeeper anymore. She looked like a woman who had finally stepped out from the shadows of the elite. She hadn't come to gloat. She had come to deliver the final blow of clarity. "They found Sophie," Elena said, her voice echoing through the small speaker. "She was alive, Julianne. Barely. He had her in the crawl space of that old hunting cabin you bought him for his graduation. He told her she was his masterpiece." Julianne felt a phantom pain in her side, as if the surgical precision of the truth was still cutting through her. "I just wanted him to be happy," she whispered, her voice sounding like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "I thought if I gave him everything, he would be good." "You didn't give him everything," Elena replied, her eyes burning with a quiet, devastating pity. "You gave him a mask. You taught him that as long as the surface was shiny, the rot underneath didn't matter. You didn't raise a son, you curated a monster." Elena stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "The police found your fire pit remains, Julianne. They found the melted silver. They know you tried to burn the world to save a ghost. Leo isn't asking for you, by the way. He told his lawyers that it was all your idea. He's already building a new story, where he's the victim of a smothering, obsessive mother." The betrayal hit Julianne harder than the sentencing. Even now, in the wreckage of their lives, Leo was still tidying up, and this time she was the dirt he was sweeping away. As Elena walked away, the sound of her sensible shoes, the ones Julianne used to mock, clicked a steady, honest rhythm down the hallway. Click. 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 And then the heavy steel doors hissed shut. Julianne leaned her forehead against the cold glass. She realized then that the most expensive luxury in the world wasn't a mahogany desk or a velvet curtain. It was the truth, and she was the only one left to pay the bill. In the silence of the prison, the perfect mother finally closed her eyes. The mask was gone. The angel was dead. And for the first time in 18 years, she wasn't Julianne Sterling. She was just a woman sitting in the dark, listening to the sound of her own heartbeat, counting the seconds of a life that was finally, terrifyingly, real.